the first big competition to Disney, especially when Disney was kind of in their weird era. This film is kind of a sleeper hit, a cult classic that didn't get born until much after, or a little bit after, this film was released. What makes The Secret of NIMH unique, especially compared to the Disney features that we've talked about before on this channel? Hello, my name is Em, and welcome to my new series where I am doing all of the Don Bluth movies, which this means all of the movies that Don Bluth worked on personally. For now, I'm not doing the ones that are still in the franchises, so like the sequels to these movies that Don Bluth did not have any attachments to, just for the sake of simplicity within my series. I might go back and redo this later and add those sequels, but for now, that's how we're doing it. I'm very excited to start this series. If you're new here, my name is Em, and I like to do some historical context on my movies before I get into my husband and I's thoughts, and we like to go and rank movies on a tier list and watch them in chronological order and rank them on a tier list. This started with my Disney series, and I know I'm definitely not the first person to watch everything in chronological order and rank it on a tier list, but there's so many people who have done it, I can't really credit anyone. But yeah, so this is my series. This is my kind of spin-off series for the Don Bluth movies. Yeah. And The Secret of NIMH was released on July 2nd, 1982. It is based on the 1971 novel Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH by Robert C. O'Brien. It stars Elizabeth Hartman as Mrs. Brisby. We'll get into the name change. Trust me, because it gets crazy. Peter Strauss as Justin, Derek Jacobi as Nicodemus, Arthur Mallet, who had played Mr. Dawes Jr. in Mary Poppins, as Mr. Ages, Dom DeLuise as Jeremy, Paul Shanar, as Jenner, John Carradine as the Great Owl, Shannon Doherty as Teresa, Will Wheaton as Martin, and actually some of these child stars will go on to do a lot. I mean, Shannon Doherty, she played Heather Duke in Heathers. That matters to anyone. I know Will Wheaton did a lot. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I know he's big. I don't know. I want to say this. I don't really like The Big Bang Theory, but I tried to really get into it, meaning I gave it like 4 or 5 good seasons. I remember Will Wheaton as like Sheldon Cooper's like enemy from Big Bang Theory, and that's all I remember him as. Jodie Hicks as Cynthia, Hermione Baddeley, who was Ellen in Mary Poppins and Madame in Aristocats, and she plays Auntie Shrew in this movie. Aldo Ray as Sullivan, Tom Hayton as Farmer Fitzgibbons, Lucille Bliss, who was Anastasia in Cinderella, as Mrs. Fitzgibbons, and Ina Fried as Timothy. The film rights to the book had been reportedly offered to Disney in 1972, but Disney kind of declined that. This is the first feature film to be directed by Don Bluth, and in September of 1979, Don Bluth, Gary Goldman, and John Pomeroy, along with 8 other animators, left the Disney company to create their own studio called Don Bluth Productions. At first, the studio was out of Don Bluth's house and garage, but later they moved to a studio in the Studio City part of Los Angeles. Definitely was like a small 2-story building. Definitely not the size of Disney Studios. Like, I mean, you watch behind the scenes content and Disney's huge, and even Disney didn't start like that, but we all got to start from somewhere. I mean, we're not going to be Disney with our first movie, and you'll see that with this. While still working at the Disney studio, they created a short film titled Banjo the Cat. If you want me to do a video on Banjo the Cat, I'd be willing to do a quick video on Banjo the Cat. But that's in the future. So they created Banjo the Cat due to feeling that certain production skills were not being taught to the animators. Don Bluth asked Ron Miller, who was the son-in-law to Walt and the president and CEO of Disney Studios at the time, to watch it, but Ron Miller kind of declined and was like, no, thank you. Gary Goldman, who also worked on that, he said that the rejection really staunched any enthusiasm they had. They were really hoping that the project could be accepted so that any costs could be recouped, and that the hours they spent on it would be worth it. Like, it was a small team doing this, but, like, they really were passionate about this. And it was, like, 20 minutes long. It wasn't, like, a short, feature. It was a short film. Like, it was, Before the production on Banjo had started, Ken Anderson read the book for The Secret of NIMH. The Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIMH. And he gave the book to Don Bluth to make a movie after Don Bluth had finished Pete's Dragon, where he was an animation director. Don Bluth then showed the book to Wolfgang Reitherman, who turned the idea down, claiming they already have a mouse at the company with Mickey, and they had recently made The Rescuers, which also centers around mice. He also reportedly said that The Rescuers and The Secret of NIMH were similar, which is not true, minus maybe mice going on an adventure. But to me, that's not... Well, I could understand it. If Disney made The Secret of NIMH so close to after The Rescuers, I feel like it'd be like, oh, so we're just making mice films now. So I could see that problem, I could see there being a problem there. However, Don Bluth would talk about the idea with the other members at the company, basically the ones I think that would work on Banjo the Cat, who would go on... And those people would actually go on to work at Don Bluth Productions. And they loved the idea of The Secret of NIMH. 2 months after this, James L. Stewart, a former executive at the Disney company, called Gary Goldman and talked about having his new production company produce Ken Anderson's idea of making The Secret of NIMH into an animated movie. At the request of the core three, I'm calling the core three Don Bluth, Gary Goldman, and John Pomeroy. They're the core three. My husband says that any bachelor trio is the Three Caballeros. I don't think any of them are bachelors, but feel free to assign them who they are in the comments. Just like any three group of girls is the Powerpuff Girls, any three group of guys is the Three Caballeros. I will not take any arguments at this time. So, Aurora Productions, which was James L. Stewart's production company, acquired the rights to the books, giving them a tighter budget and less time to make this film than a Disney feature. One of the earliest drafts of the film was written by Stephen Barnes. His version was closer to the original novel and had more of a focus on the rats at NIMH, similar to the book. The character of Isabella from the book, a female rat with a crush on Justin, described as a motormouth, was also featured in his draft. Most of her dialogue would end up being given to Nicodemus in the final cut of the film. A revised synopsis was completed in July of 1980 by an undisclosed author, and this version brought the story closer to the version that we see, ending with the disappearance of the rats, leaving the characters and the audiences to wonder if they ever existed. Don Bluth would make many changes to the story, the biggest change being the addition of magic and magical objects that are not found in the original novel. He explained the change with, quote, "Regarding magic, we believe that animation calls for some magic to give it a special fantastic quality. The magic amulet given to Mrs. Frisbee is meant to signify her internal power. and Nicodemus was made into a wizard to create more mystery and intrigue about the rats. Jenner was also given more prominence in the film, being mentioned in the book only as a traitor who leaves the rat colony, and in the movie giving him an arc in order to create a more strong antagonist. In the original book, Justin rescues Mrs. Brisby from the cage while the rats rescue her children, but Don Bluth wanted a story that focuses more on her need to save her children. And with the amulet and all that stuff and her independence worth, I feel like it's so much better because her arc is so great with her it's so much motherly love in this movie. Like, in a way, it really says about the strengths of mothers and the lengths that they would go to for their children, and I really appreciate that. I love her just ability to go above and beyond for her family, and her strength just in, it's such a motherly strength that I found that quite a few women have for those that they love, but not, like, it's a selflessness, and I really do enjoy that, because personally for me, I would do a lot for the people that I care about. During the production, Whammo, this is the crazy thing, okay. During the production, Whammo, the manufacturers of the Frisbee, had to be contacted about the name of the character Mrs. Frisbee with a concern about the possible trademark infringement. I bet you, like, they were in a meeting and the lawyers were like, oh, okay, let's just do this just to be sure, you know? Let's just do this just to make sure. Like, it completely slipped everybody's minds, and they were meeting with the lawyers, and they were like, let's just do this. And they're like, oh crud, I had not even thought about that. And so they sent the notice being like, you know what, let's hope for the best. You know, I think things will all work out. You know, it'll be the small thing. It was not. So the request to allow the name to be used was rejected by Whammo. So the production team had to be told that they had to change her name. At this time, the voice work had already been completed, meaning that the actors had to come back in and record lines. John Carradine, who voiced the Great Owl, was unavailable, meaning they had to do the tedious work and sound editing of taking the B sound from his other lines and replacing the F sound in Mrs. Frisbee with it. Listen, I am somebody who is a creative person. I understand inside and out the importance of copyright. Trust me, I get it. I am someone where that is the case. Problem. I just think this is so sad and funny. Because as a human, this is the most frustrating thing in the world. When you think that everything's cruising, you know, and then someone's like, oh, make sure we got to do this. And you're like, what? What do you mean this logistical thing that we didn't think about that we should have gotten done months ago didn't happen? You're joking. And then now you have to take time and do a lot more than you thought in order to have this work. It's just kind of a little bit sad when it happens, you know. The most memorable casting, as said by Gary Goldman, was actually Dom DeLuise for Jeremy. And Dom DeLuise actually would go on to be a very big prominent voice in the Don Bluth movies. John Pomeroy, Don Bluth, and Gary Goldman considered him after watching his 1978 movie The End in their own personal time independently of one another. So they did it separately. It was like the Mary Poppins thing where they saw Julie Andrews on the, oh my gosh, I can't remember, Ed Sullivan. Was it Ed Sullivan? I think it was Ed Sullivan. On the Ed Sullivan show, and they're like, did you see, they went to work the next day, and they're like, did you see her on the Ed Sullivan show? Oh my gosh, she'd be great for Mary Poppins. I feel like that's what happened with most of the casting decisions, especially Dom DeLuise. Production lasted from January 1980 to early June of 1982. The goal set by the studio was to return animation into its golden era, which they wanted to do by focusing on strong characters and story, as well as experimenting with unusual and more labor-intensive techniques. Don Bluth believed that older techniques were being abandoned in order to have lower production costs, and that the only way the medium could survive would be to continue using older techniques. They experimented with rotoscoping, multiple passes on the camera to give transparent shadows, backlit animation, and multiple color palettes for the characters to fit different lighting situations. So this was like day, night, whatever, and water, and, Computerized versions of the multiplane camera were also manufactured for this movie. Objects like the birdcage and the boats were made as physical models, painted and photographed to be Xeroxed onto animation cells and then painted. On those animation cells. This is kind of like what they did in 101 Dalmatians with Cruella's car. If you want to know more about that, I have a little bit about that in my 101 Dalmatians video. Mrs. Brisby's home and multiple locations from the film were built as models and photographed from different angles to use as a reference. This is kind of like what they did in Lady and the Tramp for Lady's home. They built like a model so that they could take pictures from her angle. If you want to know more about that, that's in my Lady and the Tramp video. To achieve the film wanted while also keeping a tight budget, they wanted to value their time and resources. The crew often worked long hours without pay, although they were offered a cut of the profits, which was not a common practice for animated film. So, think of, residuals. So they were basically offered residuals for this film, which is kind of crazy. This has almost never been done for an animated film, and I'm sure it's almost never been done since. 100 workers were in-house, and then there were 45 working out of house at home on cell painting. So 100 workers in-house, and I assume that's animation and stuff like that and backgrounds and all that thing, while 45 were working out of house and working from their own home on the cell painting. Many minor roles, including most crowd work, were done by the in-house staff. The budget came down to $21.6 million adjusted for inflation, with Don Bluth, Gary Goldman, and John Pomeroy, as well as the executive producers at Aurora Studios, mortgaging their homes to complete the film for a collective $2.3 million when adjusted for inflation. Their investments would, be first to be repaid upon profit. They mortgaged their home. They pulled a Walt Disney. They pulled a Walt Disney with Snow White. But the funny thing is, Walt was the only one to mortgage his home. In this one, they all did it. They believed in this film. I think the way that Walt did with Snow White, this is their Snow White in so many ways. Even though it didn't revolutionize animation as a medium, but I do think it revolutionized the kind of tone and the kind of direction of animation, because we're coming out of this Xeroxy era of harsh lines with Xerox, and they can play a little bit more and play into classical a little bit more than they used to, while also kind of pioneering techniques, like I said, the computer multiplane camera. The score is composed by Jerry Goldsmith, who had composed Planet of the Apes, Alien, and Poltergeist, and would actually go on to compose the music for Mulan later on, with this being his first animated movie that he composed. It was performed by the National Philharmonic Orchestra. Tim Hildebrandt, which some of you might know, he did a lot of movie posters back in the day, painted movie posters, particularly the UK Star Wars poster where Luke is holding the lightsaber up. That one was him. He painted The Secret of the NIMH promotional poster. The film's distributor, MGM, shared barely any interest in the film, leading Aurora Productions to raise another over $4 million at the time from private funding to pay for the prints of the posters and advertising. Like, Secret of NIMH really is an underdog story here of this little tiny studio. I mean, Walt would 100% be proud, because this kind of sounds like the production of Snow White in some ways, but at least that got funded. Like, this, it's kind of crazy. They're like, yeah, we'll produce it, we'll distribute it, but, like, we don't really believe in it that much, you know? Like, we're trying to go against a giant, like, Disney, you know? But, like, I'm like, okay. It's a good movie. I really genuinely like The Secret of NIMH. Although The Secret of NIMH faced heavy competition with E.T., ironically, Steven Spielberg would be a part of future Don Bluth productions. It performed better in its opening week than Poltergeist, Rocky III, and Star Trek II. Rocky III, I don't know. Listen, this is crazy, and this comes from someone whose dad grew up in Philly. Rocky means a lot to Philadelphians. I have never seen Rocky. I have never seen a Rocky movie. But Poltergeist is a really big movie. Really big movie. And I don't know anything about Star Trek. I feel like Star Trek, maybe I'm crazy. I feel like Star Trek has kind of left the cultural zeitgeist, whereas Star Wars has kind of stayed. I feel like Star Trek has kind of quietly left the pop culture zeitgeist. It grossed $49.7 million when adjusted for inflation in the United States. This is The Secret of NIMH. However, it was more successful in home video, cable, and foreign releases. The Secret of NIMH, and I'm not surprised that it is more popular in foreign releases, because if you've watched foreign animated movies, they're most often a little bit darker and contain some more adult themes. I'm not quite sure why that is. I think that's because they consider animation to not just be a children's medium like we do in the United States. In fact, we've kind of seen that we have some issues when people decide to do adult animation at times. Particularly adult animation films. I feel like we've kind of gotten past it with adult animation TV shows, but still adult animation films are still a little bit dicey. This is just kind of my PSA to everybody that your medium can be for any age. Meaning, if you are a parent, look into the movie before seeing it, please. Anyway, The Secret of NIMH has pretty positive reviews from critics, praising the resurrection of classical animation style and telling a mature story and incorporating a deeper plot. It did have a bad review from a critic about having too many characters that there wasn't one to connect to. And I'm like, I don't think you watched the movie. You're supposed to connect with Mrs. Brisby. They said that it may not resonate as well on an emotional level with younger viewers since it has so many characters and involves them in so many different problems that there's nobody for the kids in the audience to strongly identify with. This was written by a man, or it's said by a man, and I think I have a problem when adults review animated films at times. Because I think that sometimes with family films, it's not for you, especially something like The Secret of NIMH, which I'm sorry, is all about Mrs. Brisby and her journey as a mother. In fact, like, I was talking to my mom on the phone last week about The Secret of NIMH, and she said, honestly, as a mother, that movie terrifies me. because I can't imagine the journey to just make sure, like, going through all that, and how scared Mrs. Brisby must feel when all she wants to do is just make sure her kids are okay and just make sure that Timmy's okay. Like, and genuinely, I think that I understand parents can understand that. And so I think it's just, it's a very not nuanced take, and taking the movie at face value to say it has too many characters just to connect with one. In fact, I feel like that's the beauty, is that there are enough characters that you can connect. And sometimes it's not about connecting with characters. Sometimes it's about connecting with the story. But I feel like Mrs. Brisby is a character you can connect with. You can understand her motivation. She is the continuous through line throughout the movie. Maybe I'm crazy by saying that, but that's the truth to me. And her, it's not complex. I mean, I understood everything as a kid, I think, with Secret of NIMH. I will say it might be a little bit confusing to a younger child, you know. They might not fully understand what's going on, especially with the NIMH rats. Because I will say the most confusing thing, because you as a child, you have the real world and you have the magic world. And I think combining these two is the most confusing thing in The Secret of NIMH. And I think I talk about that in our thoughts. But I will say that is probably the most confusing thing. I don't think it's too contrived by too many characters. I don't think there's too many characters. I think the characters get introduced as they're needed. There's something to be said about what's the purpose of the great owl. But other than that, you know. But in a way, the great owl is a connection to Nicodemus in some way. But anyway. Yeah. It won Best Animated Film at the Saturn Awards that year. So apparently, I just recently learned this, the Saturn Awards are for sci-fi and fantasy films. So, yeah. And a direct-to-DVD sequel, The Secret of NIMH 2, Timmy to the Rescue, was released in 1998. Like I said at the top, I don't really have any plans on doing this one, as there was no direct connection to Don Bluth. Mainly just because I don't want to watch all 14 Land Before Times. That might need to be paid content later on. In 2009, it was announced that a remake was being planned for The Secret of NIMH, but nothing really came of it. In 2015, the rights to the book were acquired by MGM. See, the first time it was acquired by Aurora Pictures. This time, it was acquired by MGM to create a CGI live-action hybrid in the style of the Smurfs and Alvin and the Chipmunks. But this also never happened, for a good reason. It was supposed to be, quote, an origin story in which an imperiled mouse protagonist befriends a comical crew of lab rats as they turn hyper-intelligent. They escape a secret laboratory and become the great minds of vermin civilization, forced to outwit the humans hot on their tails. There was then planned a live-action remake in 2019 with the Russo brothers attached, but this is probably also not happening. There was also reportedly a series based on the books beginning development in 2021, but that's not The Secret of NIMH itself. That's the books. So if that happens, that's not The Secret of NIMH movie. That's Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. There's a difference. Anyway, that's all I have. So I hope you enjoy the rest of this video, and I hope you enjoy the Don Bluth Tierlist series. My husband and I have really I've had this in my mind for a while, and my husband and I have really wanted to do it, but we haven't figured out how, so I'm glad that we're finally starting and everything. So thank you so much for watching. Anything helps. If you want to watch The Secret of NIMH, as of recording, it is for free on YouTube and for free on Tubi. So if you would like to watch The Secret of NIMH, I would recommend doing either of those. If it's not for free on YouTube anymore, months and months ago when I was planning this, it was still for free on Tubi. So it probably should be by the time this comes out. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching my history portion, and stay tuned for my husband and I's thoughts on The Secret of NIMH. So we just finished The Secret of NIMH, and something I want to say, because we just watched The Fox and the Hound, is we're seeing this usher in the 80s of this kind of more mature children's film, with more mature themes, with more mature things. This movie, I remember, had scary parts as a child. Yeah. There are scary moments in this that could scare children. The other thing is, I'm like, there's so many things to say about this movie. One big one is that it might be a little bit hard, especially in like the middle, for littles. It's not very a littles movie.
What I was going to say is I think I would put this one similar to kind of like The Dark Crystal. I don't know if you've seen that one. Where like it uses a children's medium, right? Mm-hmm. Puppets in the case of The Dark Crystal, and in this case, animated cartoons. But it uses it in a way that's definitely intended not for a very little audience. I remember as a kid, and maybe we should rewatch this sometime, watching The Dark Crystal and sitting through it and going, I only barely know what's going on this plot. I just thought it was cool. And I'd imagine like a kid watching this feeling the same way of like, I don't really fully understand what's going on, but it's cool.
I feel like I watched this one a few times, but also at the same time, I watched quite a bit of Don Bluth and also kind of Don Bluth adjacent. I don't think Fern Gully is Don Bluth, but I did watch that as a kid.
Anastasia is either.
Anastasia?
Yeah, like the Fox Studios Anastasia. I don't think
that's Don Bluth.
It is? Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, because I was like, it's a similar like mood. I don't know how to say it.
You're so funny. This one also, I also know that there's a Secret of the NIMH 2 that I believe I've also seen. And so for that reason, like, I kind of might be getting the two mixed up in my head at times. But this one is very interesting in that I watched it when I was a kid, probably at least once, maybe a few times. But I don't remember much of the middle. And you want to know why? Because that's a lot of the dialogue dense stuff. I don't remember much.
Yeah, Mrs. Bisbee.
Like, I think I remember. I think I remember like the beginning of this one, and that's pretty much it. The beginning and maybe the very, very end with the amulet part.
Yeah. And that was kind of what I was talking about with the Dark Crystal comparison, because I feel like it's similar. I remember there being a lot of dialogue in the Dark Crystal to where, like I said, me as a kid who didn't fully grasp the dialogue. I mean, I understood English. I was definitely old enough to understand what they were talking about and to know the general plot. I was still kind of lost.
Well, I think especially with Secret of the NIMH and the whole, like, laboratory thing that happens, especially because everything we've been shown in this world is magical so far. I think that would be very hard for a kid to understand, because I think in a kid's mind there is the magical and there is the not magical. There's the real world stuff, and I don't think a child would be able to fully comprehend or understand that. And I think that for me, something that I wanted to talk about is how interesting it is that this world blends the real with the magical, which is almost never done in any property just in media, because it is so reality breaking. So to have something real in a world that is magical, and to have something magical in a world that is supposed to be real and is supposed to reflect our real world, can be a little bit hard to understand. And in fact, they don't really truly ever explain what the amulet is.
Yeah.
And why it is that way. I think Nicodemus is just some weird higher power being.
Okay, so the way I was kind of seeing it, at least the way I've kind of looked at it a bit, I've not actually read Watership Down, but it was kind of giving me a lot of, like, the mood that comes from it. I kind of know what generally goes on. It is one I want to read, though. I've heard it's really good. I kind of talked of it briefly with you, but the idea is kind of similar in this case, where there's, like, a burrow of rabbits, and they... a set of them leave because one of them has like a kind of prophetic vision of sorts about their burrow being destroyed. Of course, most of the rabbits don't believe him, so they skitter off and the burrow gets destroyed. But a lot of the book kind of talks a lot about rabbit language and like what they refer to things that we call, and also talks a lot about like their religion. And the such, even though they're just regular rabbits, it's not even like a Secret of NIMH situation where they're like experimented upon or something. They're just straight up regular rabbits, but they have that sense of otherworldliness that kind of comes as a reflection of their religion being used to view on the world. And I think Secret of NIMH is doing something similar here, where like these rats are having a higher intelligence. And so their capacity to understand philosophy and to understand, religion or faith or whatever is kind of being reflected upon things such as this amulet. Whether or not, the humans might think it's magical or not, it's magical to the mice and the rats. At least that's how I would kind of look at it.
The amulet literally pulls.
Yeah.
The house out of the mud at the end. So what is this amulet thing?
Well, that's what I was saying, is like to us it doesn't mean anything, but to them it could be symbolic of something. Almost like a cultural difference, if that makes sense. I don't know. That might be maybe not the best way to describe it.
It doesn't, because the amulet is clearly magic. So if it's symbolic for something, what is it supposed to be symbolic for?
Maybe it's just full of the magic juice from them.
I think it's just magic. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about is just something that we brought up, is that clearly there has been generations that have been bred with the NIMH genes or whatever. Clearly that is just the case. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
I do think it's really interesting. So, I guess something that I kind of put together kind of like partway through the movie that I don't know if anyone else caught. I'm sure it's obvious. It's probably even said in the movie, but I was not paying attention about like NIMH standing for like the National Institute of Mental Health.
It is.
Yeah.
Because there's a moment where the farmer's like, honey, the National Institute of Mental Health wants to talk to us about the rats.
I don't remember that. I only remember he was saying something like about the psychologists or whatever.
Yeah, no, he says that.
Oh, okay.
The farmer says that in the movie.
Okay. I don't remember that.
Yeah. So NIMH stands for that. Yeah, I think it's just really interesting because this movie, and I'm sure the book also, kind of has this anti-animal testing stance. And I have to agree. I mean, keep in mind, this was the 80s. Animal testing had been the norm for, like, years and years and years and years. Where, like, nowadays, testing on animals is completely unheard of.
Yeah.
But, like, back in the day...
Yeah.
Like, in the 80s, this was starting to be phased out. Yeah. And, like, think about it. In the 80s, just a lot of inhumane studies were being phased out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've heard of the mice utopia experiment.
No.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that. That's a big can of worms. We'll have to talk about another time. But just a very, very unethical study that was performed on a bunch of mice.
I guess if you want to learn about that, you're going to have to yourself. If somebody wants to be nice and put it in the comments, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, to me, I like this movie. I think it's a good movie. I think it has a lot of things in it that is really, I think, would be hard to understand for children. Because me personally, I was sitting here being like, okay, so we have one goal. Her one goal is to do this, and then, oh, her goal's changing. Oh, her goal's changing. Oh, her goal's changing. Yeah. Like, I feel like different things are changing. Dude, I thought Timmy was 100% a goner.
It kind of,
when the house sank in the mud, you can't tell me Timmy wasn't a goner.
It's a clone. Timmy's a clone.
And then Timmy showed up in the end scene and is like, oh my gosh, Timmy's alive. Oh, did we see the aunt again? Or did Auntie Shrew sacrifice her? Oh, wait, no, she was at the end, yeah.
Yeah, they talk about her at the end, that she was coming to visit.
Because I was like, guys, I did not see Auntie Shrew in that scene.
I think what also makes it hard, and maybe this is a genre thing, now that I'm sitting back and thinking about it, I think it might be that NIMH has a little bit of dark fantasy into it that is hard for littles to understand.
I think so.
I talked about, Dark Crystal, Labyrinth. What are some other ones? I've heard Black Cauldron is similar. I've not seen Black Cauldron.
That is actually our next Disney movie.
Yep. So as you're watching this, I've not seen it. So I'm going to just
No, you say as you're watching it, as we're recording this, we haven't seen it.
Well, but as the person is watching it and is receiving the video,
we probably have seen it.
Okay, well, me, the person here being recorded, has not seen it.
So you mean as we're recording?
As we're recording. I have not seen Black Cauldron, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just similar and it's just something that comes with the genre, I guess. Which is kind of weird because you don't really think about it that way, but I don't know, I guess it's just kind of a side effect of the style of the genre and stuff.
And I find it interesting that we're kind of going in the 80s with this kind of darker fantasy vibe rather than the good, clean, fun fantasy, like we're having these darker moments. But it's interesting because Disney has always kind of had these darker moments, but it hasn't been and played with this amount of dark moments before, and so I think like this kind of genre shift will really influence just the entire animation going forward. Like, I think we'll see a little bit more darker moments. Like, I'm thinking stuff like Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, Beauty and the Beast goes a little bit.
It goes a little bit more darker. Like that final confrontation scene. Like, I'd say the confrontation scene in this movie is very reflective of the confrontation scene in Beauty and the Beast as well. Like, I think that Don Bluth did very good here. This is a gorgeous movie.
True.
I'd say he really...
Well, we were like, dang, that's a really pretty scene.
Yeah, I think he really did very, very well for himself in learning the techniques of the animators at Disney and learning from other animators and incorporating that into his own work to create an industry standard, basically. Like, this is kind of, I think, in a way, going toe-to-toe with Disney right now.
And we did kind of briefly, while we were watching the movie, kind of talk a little bit about it. It does have a few holes in its animation. We talked a few times while we were watching the movie about, like, how you can kind of see some of the holes in the animation, especially in some of like the character designs and the such, at least for me. Yeah, you could see like a few little holes of like, oh, you could touch this up, make it a little bit better. But like, isn't this like the first like proper Don Bluth studio movie or whatever? So like, honestly, for that standard, it's pretty dang good.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, there definitely have been, like, worse initial films from studios.
Yeah.
One of them I think of is there was this, if any of you, and I will be willing to watch this, but The Thief and the Cobbler, Like, it was this very, it was famously worked on for years and years and years because, like, the director, like, head animator guy was a extreme perfectionist, and he would not, like, it would
like
get...
you.
No, not to the point where he was like, it would get, like, almost finished, and then he'd be like, no, we gotta start over.
Dang.
And he would, like, micromanage to the point where this thing took, like, 20 years to complete. Like, 20 or 30 years to complete this thing. Because it took him so long to be doing this. And honestly, just, like, commending Don Bluth over here, I think just the bare minimum of you know, like, doing the thing.
Yeah.
of completing, starting a studio, of putting out a film that is comparable to Disney quality. It's very different from Disney, but given that a year prior Disney had released kind of a semi darker than normal Disney film with Fox and the Hound, you know, I feel like the tone is ready for this.
I think they're stepping back just one more step backwards. I think there is some wisdom. I've never seen Thief and the Cobbler. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to judge it. But I think there is some wisdom in that story versus this, where sometimes your first project, your second project, or any project, it's okay if it's not perfect. Mm-hmm. It's better to look for something to be completed, that it can be critiqued, and you can learn about what to improve for next time, than it is to constantly work on it and expect perfection.
Well, we'll see what gets worked on, like, from here to American Tail, which is our next one. We'll see how much improves. But one thing I will say is, from Disney, it is drastically different from Snow White to Pinocchio. You can tell what they decided to work on, and it's kind of incredible, you know?
Yeah.
The amount of change that could happen between Snow White and Pinocchio is crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, I'm excited to go on this journey. Are you excited to go on this journey with me?
Always. Any journey with you.
So I was talking to my mother, and how this tier list is going to work, let's just talk about it. So these are going to be movies that Don Bluth has specifically worked on. If you would like movies that have been produced within the Don Bluth properties after, you know, and not had Don Bluth attached to them, please let me know. But
please don't make us watch all the Land Before Time.
All 14
please.
Land Before Times.
Please.
But for now, we'd rather not do that until after the Disney tier list is wrapped up. So after the Disney tier list is wrapped up, I'm willing to, like, posthumously go back and say, okay, you know what? Let's watch all the frickin' Land Before Times. Let's watch Five-O Goes West. He's crying right now. Let's watch Five-O Goes West. Let's watch whatever. Secret of NIMH 2. Secret of NIMH 2, because I swear I've seen that one. But also the other thing is, we're kind of down to watch whatever anybody wants at this point. Where do we rank it on the tier list? I'd say A. We said A because I don't think this movie is perfect. It definitely has that weird kind of a little bit boring middle chunk.
I don't think it was that boring, but I know that that's because I like this flavor of story. I like when there's kind of like an adventure in multiple steps and stuff. It's almost like it's reading a book for me, which granted this one is based off of a book, but you get what I mean. So like, I don't think that's much of a hole, but like we talked about in the past, if it was 6 or 7 year old me, I would either be asleep halfway through the movie or I'd be bored out of my mind. And I get it. It is a movie that needs a slightly higher audience to understand.
I would have gone up and gotten a snack at this point. Like, at that point, like, I would have said, I'm out. Like, I would say it's not that bad, but, like, it is a little bit of a drop. And for that reason, I'd probably put it pretty close to the top of A. I mean, there's nothing in this tier list right now, but pretty close into the top of A.
Yeah.
Knowing that Anastasia is going to get S.
It's okay.
What?
I love Anastasia.
What? Why?
Well, maybe there's another movie that gets S.
Okay.
Land Before Time 14. What about that one?
No, not Land Before Time 14. Land Before Time 12.
12. Sorry.
12.
I've never seen any of Land Before Time.
I haven't either. Is this a safe space to admit that I've seen some Don Bluth, but I haven't seen all Don Bluth movies?
That's why we're making the tier list, so we could see all Don Bluth.
All Don Bluth. I haven't seen American Tail. I haven't seen All Dogs Go to Heaven. I haven't seen Rock-a-Doodle.
I've seen All Dogs Go to Heaven. I remember none of the plot, though. I literally remember nothing. All I remember is the girl and the dog. My older sister was big into it, but I remember nothing.
I haven't seen Land Before Time. I haven't seen Titan AE. Don't know what that's about. I've seen Thumbelina. Love Thumbelina. I've seen Anastasia. Love Anastasia. I haven't seen Bartok the Magnificent.
Huh?
That's the only sequel in here that Don Bluth actually worked on.
What's Darn Block? Oh, that's the Bat guy.
Yeah.
From Anastasia?
Yes.
He worked on that?
No.
Isn't it a holiday special?
No, Bartok the Magnificent is the Anastasia sequel.
Yeah. With the Bat guy.
Yeah, and it's the only sequel that Don Bluth worked on. I haven't seen Troll in Central Park. Yeah, we're getting into some interesting things over here.
Don Bluth picked some really out there movies. But I get it. We're in what was basically the 80s equivalent of the indie scene here. So I guess it's not that big of a deal, but still.
Secret of NIMH.
A tier.
A tier. Don Bluth movies, good. If you'd like to see more series, feel free to drop them in the comments, your ideas. If it gets enough likes, I'll do it.
If we have to watch 14 Land Before Time movies.
If I don't like it, but it gets enough likes, I'll still do it.
We'll have to eat our veggies. Sometimes, when it comes to love, you have to wait till it hits you, like how it did with Jeremy.
Oh, we didn't even talk about Jeremy.
I like him. He's cool. That's the general consensus, because she hasn't said anything. I hope you have a good day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye-bye.